There are a lot of really bad recommendations that get circulated for people that are coming to visit Paris, and I think there are 3 things you should watch out for, but also 5 challenges in making good recommendations that I'm very aware of, like really aware of, and I thought I would share a little bit today about how I'm trying to make sure that at least I overcome those challenges as I make recommendations for people coming to Paris. Because if you're gonna travel halfway around the world to hopefully have a great time seeing something like Notre Dame as it reopens, you're probably gonna wanna also make sure that you have a fun, delicious, well-caffeinated, possibly slightly drunk time. And while it's not hard to have a great time in Paris, it's also not hard to kind of screw up and end up in some tourist traps along the way, which hopefully I can help you navigate your way around. The first challenge inherent in this is something that's existed for a long time, not only with social media, but with blogs and print media as well, is copying, like just shameless copying for the purposes of making your own content, which social media has exacerbated because at the end of the day, like let's say you're traveling through Europe and you are a travel content creator or you want to be one, and so you're making all the content you can to try and build that up. You might end up just kind of grabbing whatever anyone else is doing, piecing that together and copying it without ever having tried it before, going, eating, hey, and moving on. And while there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, we all have to start somewhere. So I'm not shaming the act of doing that. I would say that it does end up creating places that are just get hyped because they're hyped, and it can be hard to know for sure if it's actually worth it or if it's just because everybody sees it so everybody does it. The second is freebies or paid posts. So this is one of those things that used to never be a problem for me because nobody knew I existed via YouTube. Like nobody in Paris is watching English speaking YouTube. So the first 6-7 years of my life here, I would walk into any restaurant and by and large, nobody knew who I was. Some coffee shops, like I would have a barista that had seen one of my videos, but otherwise I flew under the radar. So I was always paying for what I ate as I went. And that's kind of how I want to keep it as much as I can, but I'm entering into this new arena where people are willing to like at least give me free food. I don't think anybody's ever gonna pay me to eat in Paris. I don't think that's ever gonna be a thing. It already feels like a stretch for them to give me anything for free. Having them know who you are and treat you better as a result actually ends up tainting the whole experience. And my fear with that, personally, is that it might lend me to think more highly of a location because they treated me so well, when in reality they don't maybe treat their average customer as well. And I'll talk more about how I'm dealing with that towards the end of the video. But it's something to be aware of that a lot of people are posting, you know, at a place, a restaurant, whatever, may have been paid to go there and at a minimum are probably getting their meal for free. And if they're not disclosing that, that could be a problem. Again, I'm not shaming that. It can be challenging and kind of awkward to say like, hey, this person paid, but we kind of have to disclose that, I think, so that people can take it with a grain of salt if you say it's really good, to be aware. But again, I'll talk about how I'm dealing with that in the future. It's just really important to be aware that it may not be an objective review. The third potential problem that you might not even be thinking about is intimidation. Chefs in French culture are kind of like rock stars, right? They're very well loved, they're very well respected, and somebody might be very intimidated in giving a negative review. Like it can be hard to be honest sometimes, even to give constructive feedback when you know that there's some very, very touchy, persnickety chefs out there who very well might come out of the shadows to attack your personal character as a result of you not liking their food. This actually happened to me recently, and I didn't even say anything negative. I was just honestly flabbergasted at how often people recommend one particular place. And the owner of that place is a notorious troll, and he came out of the woodwork just to lambast us for no good reason. He's very angry. I don't know what his problem is. I won't bother naming him here because who cares? But that actually does have a direct impact on how you feel about a place and whether or not you might recommend it. Also, whether or not you might just be honest about the location. And that raises some ethical concerns, I think, personally, in recommending where to go when you're here in Paris. So those are 3 things to be aware of. People copy like crazy. AI is only making that worse. And AI is a whole nother discussion that we can come back around to in another video. People get paid or free stuff, so that might impact how they feel about a place or what they tell you. And sometimes there are jerks out there who will intimidate you into maybe not talking about it if you didn't like the experience that you had. Or it's not even necessarily that they're jerks. You might just want to get along with people in the community and not want to ruffle any feathers. And I'll talk about how I generally deal with that as well. But even beyond that, I think there are 5 challenges to just making good recommendations and doing it consistently well. And the first is alignment of taste. Like, how do you even know if you like the same things that somebody else likes? For me personally, I often actually look at things like specialty coffee, craft beer, natural wine, because I feel like those are really definitive categories that you can find very good recommendations for. And if they make good recommendations there, and those recommendations line up with what maybe the people working there would do, like somebody working at a natural wine bar or a specialty coffee shop is probably going to also have similar tastes. That's often where I go to get recommendations. Find a good coffee shop in whatever town I'm going to, and then ask the people working there, where would you go? Really great way to start. The second one is related, and it's, who's this even for? When I made my guide, it was very much just places that I'd found that I liked as I wandered the city, which is one of the reasons you don't have to worry also about me being, at least in the past, persuaded by people paying me to do this. It was because I love exploring the city. I love wandering around and finding things that I enjoy. And people asked me where they should go. And so when I made the first version of my guide, the PDF, it was very much just like, this is what I like. But that's not exactly what everybody's looking for, especially if you're coming here and you want the French experience and you're looking for croque monsieur or like macaron or whatever, macaron. Or if you're looking for macaron, he's not in my guide. But if you're looking for those things, then there's a really good chance that I might not have been the best guide for that. I've added so much more French food and pastries and whatever else into my guide as time has gone on. But the reality is that those of us that live here don't really eat French that often. It's very much like if you moved to London and only ate fish and chips all the time, you would be considered insane. It's an international city filled with amazing international cuisine. I want to explore the world from my front door. That's a big part of how I end up saving places, and that's often what I recommend would be for. But I've accommodated a lot more. I do love good French food. We've had a lot of good French food, but we also have some things where there are ways that we're gonna make this better in time. But even just how to communicate when you're looking for what you think is the same thing, there are a lot of useless words out there like authentic. Like, what is an authentic French or Vietnamese or anything other experience, when it's like, yeah, but that's not how my grandma used to make it. And I have a very limited experience in a lot of different foods along these lines because I grew up eating, chicken and rice, but the bland, very white American Eastern Washington version of it. Good salmon though. We had great salmon growing up. I have that going for me. I just met a patron of mine, Todd, on the street on his bike, which is about as random as it gets. So I think that he's today's patron producer. Thanks, Todd. It was nice to meet you. Thanks to all my patrons for making this all possible. What was the third challenge in all of this? Gotta check my notes. I was actually walking and talking to myself, and I figured I would capture the emotion right now because it's kind of amazing. I love this. This is what I want my life to be. Wandering around Paris, showing the places I love, just exploring and seeing Saint-Gervais. I hardly walk by this church anymore. It's so nice to see. They're making a memorial park here and another really big urban park in front of Hôtel de Ville. I love it. More parks, more green spaces. I love this city. The fourth challenge, and this is a big one, is that places change, a lot. Sometimes their management changes entirely and the menu then changes as a result, or the service changes because the staff that you really liked before get replaced by people that are kind of goobers for whatever reason, and you don't know it until you go back to try it. And this becomes really challenging when you get hundreds of places that you have to keep tabs on. That makes the annual audit we do every year really tough. And then fifth is that places just close all the time. You don't even know it. You might go walking by and discover it, or you might be flicking through Google Maps and it says it's permanently closed. Is it actually permanently closed? Or is that just a mistake somebody made? I don't know. We need to go find out, call them, figure this out. I wish, this is pretty grim, but I kind of wish it was like the Hunger Games, where every time a restaurant died, they announced it in the sky, so you knew for sure it was over, and then you could remove it, from your guide. But instead, you find these things out in the most awkward of ways sometimes. Of course, if you do get my guide and you do ever run into something that doesn't live up to the hype or is closed, especially if something is closed, there's a little red 3-dot button thing in my guide that you can use to give us feedback. And if you want to put in there, you found a place that was closed or you had a problem with it, that'd actually be really, really helpful. We haven't even taken into consideration yet personal development and just growth. The more I travel, the more types of food I eat, the more my tastes change and what I'm craving changes and what I feel like recommending changes based on what I actually want to eat. And do I recommend things based on what I would want to eat or what I know you might want to eat as somebody who's coming in and looking for X, Y, or Z? And even if, I'm not so into that myself, I do know a good one over there and point you in that direction. Now all of a sudden it's an entirely different emotional experience because it's being tied up with my reputation and sense of identity in how I present it and why and to whom, and you get it. So, how do I handle this? We audit my guide once a year. I used to do this every time anyways, just to go back through and make sure when it was a PDF, and it has grown a lot. Now that it's online, there's a lot more to go through, and it's a lot more complicated to get through all of it, believe it or not. But beyond just wanting to make sure that everywhere is still open and available, I think one of the biggest things for me right now is going back through and making sure that I am really honest and really transparent about why I recommend any place that is in my guide to begin with. Like if you're gonna come to Baby Love, why would I send you to the weirdest named burger place that you could possibly have to have a smash burger in Paris? Because it's really delicious, is why. Oh man, still lives up to it for me. But beyond the logistical challenges of keeping my guide up to date and making hopefully good recommendations, I think the bedrock of it is to just be as honest and transparent as possible about why I'm recommending it. There are some bars that I love that are super trashy, but I love because the environment is great, the beer is cheap, maybe there's a phenomenal view, maybe the service is terrible, but you get this pint where you can sit at a table and see the Eiffel Tower off in the distance and really get a neighborhood feel, like you're really, really in Paris and not in some like ritzy, glammy place that's only for rich people kind of a thing. Or maybe I really love a place for its dessert, specifically as a really good dessert, or another place that has the best pizza in the world. And there are really only a handful of places, like maybe 10, that I would rate for myself personally as like craveable and with no caveats. Like I would send you there no matter who you were for whatever reason, because I love it that much. If I could just manage to like maintain that level of honesty, it's when you lose sight of that. I think it's when I'm more worried about being judged for liking a place. We haven't really audited what I've written about places in a while, but I really want to make sure to go back in and make sure to highlight, like, if you want this, maybe don't go here, but if you're looking for this, it's a great place to go. That kind of stuff. And if it is absolutely like, listen, if you're looking for a smash burger, you can go to Baby Love and you will love it, guaranteed. Unless you're my dad, who hates like melted American style cheese, then watch out for that, but then you're probably not a smash burger fan to begin with. I can say that, yeah, Baby Love, it's bizarre, but you can also grab these to go and sit in the park across the street and just enjoy a little bit of sunshine. And in the winter, when you get some direct sun like this, you just gotta take advantage of it while it lasts.
I wouldn't recommend it for the ambiance, for the comfort, but for the burger, oh yeah.
And I almost forgot to mention hype. Like, how do you handle when places are opening and there's a ton of hype around them, or they just blow up and everybody knows them and everybody's going? And this is a big part of the reason that I'm not interested in being the first person to any given restaurant, because they often don't have things dialed in. It might not be as good as it could be, or maybe they put a ton more effort into it early on and that dwindles down later. So I'm always interested in seeing how are places carrying on months, years later. And the other thing is, like, I also just don't really want to get roped into that, because it becomes a dragon that you could chase literally forever. Like being the person who's always first in line at everything to try it and see how it is, whatever else. It sounds exhausting, to be honest. There's also just so much going on in Paris. Like, I could literally never try it all. Doesn't mean I'm not gonna try it all. I'm gonna put a solid effort in. For example, and absolutely not joking here, as soon as I finished saying that there's always something new to try, I walked by this coffee shop, Cortado. Didn't know it existed. It might be on my list. I didn't check my list. My camera just died though. Anyways, I'm gonna give it a try. So it turns out it's a Spanish coffee shop with croissant and pan con tomate and some tasty coffee. I just got a filter to go. I'm still working on the diet, so I can't. This is the other problem, is right now, this is a season of my life where I'm trying not to spend too much. I'm also trying not to eat too much, like on a bit of a, really back on the diet for a minute. I miss this. I miss exploring and trying new places, and we're gonna get back to it more intently here very soon, but just enjoy this while it lasts. So again, the freebies thing is new for me, and this is a challenge that I'm actually handling, I think, in a particular way, because I'm open to the idea of getting free stuff, especially from the places that I already know and love and would recommend regardless. So if they invite me to come have a coffee or something, I'm not that worried about a conflict of interest, because I already know that I love them and recommend them. And so yeah, if they want to support me in turn, I think that's totally fine. It's the places that I don't know yet that I'm checking out that I'm a little bit more cautious of. A lot of them will reach out and say, hey, we'll give you a free meal in exchange for like a reel. But to me, that's a little bit too far. I feel like once it makes it to a reel, and especially if it makes it to my guide, then that is an an absolute for sure recommendation, something that I really want to be sure I can stand by. So what we've been doing is just saying, hey, if you guys would like me to make stories when I come, like I'll come and I'll eat and I'll check it out. I'm going to take some photos and I will definitely post to my stories on Instagram. That's kind of the exchange. So as my audience, if you're watching and you see on Instagram that I'm posting on stories, I think it's that tricky thing of like, the way that I'll do it is I'll always say, thank you for inviting me to come to that brand when I post those stories. But as long as it's just in the stories, I'm not as worried about it. But if it makes it to a reel or to my guide, then you know for sure I stand by it, regardless of whether or not anybody gave me anything along the way. And odds are good, they probably didn't. And maybe none of this is new to you, but this is the kind of stuff that I think about all the time when it comes down to trying to make sure that I'm giving the best advice I can give when coming to Paris. And to whom? I think it's really challenging because there are millions of people that come to this city every year, and we're all with different expectations, hopes, desires for their trip. There are people that are moving here. There are people that want luxury. There are people that want budget travel. There are people that want all kinds of different things. And it's really easy to get roped up in trying to serve everybody. But I guess this year I want to double down on trying to serve the community that I already have, whether that's my local community here in Paris, the local businesses that I want to try and help to survive and to thrive here in Paris, but also the community that has grown on YouTube and the people that are coming to Paris and want to see Paris as I see it, I suppose. And that's really the kicker. Ultimately, this whole thing started when I made a PDF based on people asking me what I would do here in Paris. And so instead of trying to appeal to all these other people and the Emily in Paris crowd, for example, nothing against being a fan of Emily in Paris, but it's a different take on the city than the one that I have. I think the best thing that I can do is just to enjoy the city as much as possible personally and share that, what I love about it, why, as honestly and transparently as I can, and really, really double down on that. And speaking of honesty and transparency, also, it's really exciting because we've dropped hints that we've been working on some itineraries and some other stuff. It's been really hard to figure out how to release that, and we didn't want to build like a whole store experience. So all these extra products that we've been building, we're going to be putting into a bundle that is an add-on to my guide. So you can have my guide or you can have my guide plus. There's some really fun stuff we're going to be putting in there. We're going to keep adding stuff to it, and we're hoping to launch that next month. So you're going to want to grab that. Obviously, if you already have my guide or you get it between now and then, you'll be able to get that add-on at a discounted rate, so don't worry about that. But also on the honesty and transparency side, we haven't raised the price of my guide in like 2 years, and we need to for both the additional cost of doing all of this, but also inflation, everything else. We're going to be raising the price by something in the range of, I think, $5. We've been debating it internally and trying to figure out what the pricing structure looks like for both of these, like the guide and guide plus situation. But yeah, we'll be raising the price in a few weeks, whenever it is that we launch that guide plus. So if you want to get in on the lower price, you're going to want to do that now, and then you'll naturally get the discounted price of the guide plus when we release that as well. Just really excited. We've been working on this for so long. It feels long overdue, and I'm really excited for it to be out in the world and to hopefully help people who are visiting. And there's just so much more to talk about around all of this, but I just wanted to kind of clue you in as to how my brain is working, at least when it comes to how I make recommendations, how I'm personally very skeptical of any recommendations I see on social media and why. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. I'd be curious to know. Thank you so much for watching, and Happy New Year if you haven't seen me yet in 2025. And yeah, I'm going to go enjoy a little bit more of the sunshine while we have it, because Paris in winter is so gray. Thanks for watching.